हेलो एवरीवन। आज हम चेन रूल ऑफ डिफरेंशिएशन पढ़ेंगे। चेन रूल इज अ वेरी यूजफुल टूल व्हाइल डिफरेंशिएटिंग कॉम्पोजिट फंक्शंस। बाय द वे, आप सबको ये डेरिवेटिव्स निकालने तो आते ही होंगे। All these are very simple functions. So let's recall the derivatives of these functions. So we all know derivative of x cube with respect to x is 3x square. Similarly, derivative of x square with respect to x is 2 times x, whereas the derivative of sin x with respect to x is cos x, and derivative of cos x with respect to x is negative sin x, right? All these are well-known facts. But notice one thing here. If we change the variable here, which is x, if we change it to a or u, the derivative will be same. I mean, the derivative of a cube with respect to a is 3a square only. The derivative of u cube with respect to u is 3u square only. So it doesn't matter whether we are taking x, a or u or any other variable. The result will be the same in all these cases. We just have to make sure that the variable at both of these places should be same. Either it can be xx, either it can be aa, either it can be uu. The variable at both of these places must be the same. Okay. Now all these functions are quite easy. But अगर मैं आपसे ये पूछूं कि क्या आप ये derivatives निकाल सकते हो? I know बहुत सारे बच्चे इन expressions को देख के ही डर जाएंगे, but ऐसे ही differentiations करने के लिए हमारे पास chain rule होता है, which is actually a great tool to differentiate composite functions. And in this video, we will discuss chain rule. So let's do it. But before going into the formality of chain rule, let us try to understand the chain rule. Let us try to visualize the chain rule by some real world scenario. Okay, so it is given that there are three friends, Aman, Peena and Charu. Y represents the number of apples picked by Aman, U represents the number of apples picked by Peena, and X represents the number of apples picked by Charu. Okay, it is given that Aman picks apples 3 times faster than Beena. Aman is 3 times faster than Beena in picking apples, and Beena is twice as fast as Charu. That means Beena is 2 times faster than Charu. So can you tell me at what rate does Aman picks the apple with respect to Charu? I hope most of the children can answer this question. They can say this is just 6 times. और आपने किया क्या होगा? आपने just इन दोनों numbers को multiply कर दिया. 3 times into 2 times become 6 times, right? And this is actually very simple, and this is actually the intuition of chain rule. So let's see how. Now let us try to visualize the scenario in terms of derivative. It is given that Aman picks apples 3 times faster than Beena. That means the change in y is 3 times the change in u. How can you represent in terms of derivatives? You can say dy upon du is equals to 3. Similarly, Beena is twice as fast as Charu. So du upon dx is equals to 2, right? And what we calculated earlier, we see that Aman is 6 times faster than Charu. What does this actually represent? It represents dy, because Aman was y, Beena was u, and Charu was x. So this blue line actually represents dy upon dx is equals to 6. Okay, so let us see it in terms of derivative. Mathematically, what we actually did, we just multiplied 3 and 2. 3 was actually dy by du and 2 was actually du by dx, right? We just multiplied these two derivatives and we obtained 6 times, which we noted it was dy by dx, right? So this is actually our chain rule. I hope you have got the intuition of chain rule. Now let us see this rule applied to functions. चेन रूल, जैसे हम लोगों ने पहले भी देखा, चेन रूल हम लोग बेसिकली कॉम्पोजिट फंक्शंस को डिफरेंशिएट करने के लिए यूज करते हैं, बिकॉज कॉम्पोजिट फंक्शंस मीन्स फंक्शन ऑफ अ फंक्शन, दैट मीन्स द फंक्शन which is applied in layers, right? As we seen in the previous illustration, there were layers. Aman was compared to Beena and Beena was compared to Charu, so there were layers. So in terms of functions, we see composition of functions. So here, if I see y is equals to sine x cube, can you tell me how many layers are there in this function? By layers, I mean जो हमारा इंडिपेंडेंट वेरिएबल है वो कितनी लेयर से होके गुजरता है. Here, our x first goes to the function cube function, so it becomes x cube. फिर हमारा x cube sine function के पास जाता है, तो हमारा sine of x cube बनता है. Right, so there are two layers through which our independent variable goes. Okay, now let us call this inner layer, the first layer, as u. That is u equals to x for the time being. Okay, so this becomes sine of, because we have set x cube to be u, it becomes sine of u. Now we can differentiate. Now we want the derivative of y with respect to x. But there is an intermediate layer of u. How can we differentiate in this case? So here our chain rule comes into the picture, as we had in our previous illustration as well. So chain rule कहता है कि dy by dx निकालने के लिए, इस पूरी चेन का डिफरेंशिएशन करने के लिए आप हर एक चेन को डिफरेंशिएट कर लो, हर एक स्मॉलर सेगमेंट्स को डिफरेंशिएट कर लो. यानी कि आप पहले dy अपॉन du निकाल लो, मतलब y का डेरिवेटिव विद रिस्पेक्ट टू u निकाल लो और u का डेरिवेटिव विद रिस्पेक्ट टू x निकाल लो. और इन दोनों इंटरमीडिएट रिजल्ट्स को अगर आप मल्टीप्लाई कर दोगे तो आपको dy by dx मिल जाएगा, जैसे कि हमने प्रीवियस इलस्ट्रेशन में देखा था. राइट, सो dy by dx निकालने के लिए हमें पहले y का डेरिवेटिव विद रिस्पेक्ट टू u निकालना होगा और फिर u का डेरिवेटिव विद रिस्पेक्ट टू x निकालना होगा और उन दोनों को मल्टीप्लाई करना होगा. सो लेट्स डू इट. अब y का डेरिवेटिव विद रिस्पेक्ट टू u मतलब dy of du. y की जगह हम लोग sin u रख लेते हैं. अब हमें क्या निकालना है? डेरिवेटिव ऑफ sin u विद रिस्पेक्ट टू u. ये क्या होता है? ये सिर्फ cos u होता है, बिकॉज यहाँ पे जो वेरिएबल है और यहाँ जो वेरिएबल है दोनों सेम है, सो इट विल बी cos ऑफ u. अब हम डेरिवेटिव ऑफ u निकालते हैं विद रिस्पेक्ट टू x. ओके, दैट मीन्स du अपॉन dx. u है हमारा x क्यूब, तो this becomes derivative of x cube with respect to x, and this is, we all know, this is 3x square, right? So we have calculated the derivative in the intermediate chains. Now let us multiply these two results to obtain derivative of y with respect to x. Okay, now after multiplying we get du by dx multiplied by dy by du. This becomes 3x square multiplied by cos u. Here you can notice that we have du in the numerator and du in the denominator. So we can actually cancel it out, and what we will be remained with? We will have dy upon dx. यही तो हमें चाहिए था, है ना? So we have dy by dx here, और यहाँ पे 3x square और यहाँ पे cos u. Okay. Now यहाँ पे cos u है, यहाँ पे u है, तो हम u को पहले सब्स्टिट्यूट कर देते हैं x क्यूब. So this becomes dy by dx equals to 3x square cos of u की जगह x cube रख दिया, so it becomes cos of x cube. Okay, so we have obtained dy by dx. But यहाँ एक चीज नोट करने वाली बात ये है that we have cancelled du from numerator and denominator very easily. But this is not actually correct to cancel. There is an entire complex proof which uses the advanced techniques of limits, but for the time being we can understand chain rule by assuming that we are just cancelling du from the numerator and denominator. Okay, so this is actually the chain rule. Now let us see the formal statement of chain. Now here is our formal statement of chain rule. So as we discussed, chain rule is used for differentiating composite function. तो सर जब भी आपको चेन रूल यूज करना हो सबसे पहले आप ये देखो कि फंक्शन कॉम्पोजिट फंक्शन है या नहीं, क्योंकि सिंपल फंक्शंस वी कैन डिफरेंशिएट इजीली, राइट? So if we have a composite function, then your first aim should be to identify the layers of the composite function. मतलब कि हमारा ये जो इंडिपेंडेंट वेरिएबल x है वो कब कब किस किस फंक्शन से होके गुजरता है. Like here in in y equals to f gx we have कि x हमारा फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल g के पास जाता है और फिर f के पास जाता है. So there are layers, right? This inner layer or the first layer is g and the outer layer or the second layer is f. So we usually call g as the inner layer, inner function, because it is applied first, and f as the outer function because it is applied second. Right? After identifying the layers of the function, we just assign gx as a temporary variable u. Okay, just assume that gx represents a temporary variable u. Now our aim is to find the derivative of u with respect to x, and derivative of fu with respect to u. Okay, and then simply find the product. You will get the derivative of phi with respect to x. Our chain will be completed. So this is basically the chain rule. Chain rule यही कहता है कि आपको अगर पूरी chain का differentiation निकालना हो तो आप इन छोटे छोटे segments, इन छोटी छोटी chains का differentiation निकालो जो कि easy होता है. तो इन intermediate results को अगर आप multiply कर दोगे तो you will actually get the derivative of the bigger chain. Okay, so I hope that I have helped you in understanding the chain rule. Thank you so much for listening to me.